This podcast is all about my journey towards finding more energy and vitality. And today on Zestology, my journey has brought me to Jordan. And partly going to talk about books, 3 or 4 books that I've read this year that I've absolutely loved and have definitely energized me and have helped me learn how to find more energy. And also one place that I visited, which is here in Jordan. At the moment I'm sat on the banks of the Red Sea. And the reason that if you've been to Jordan, you might know that it's the Red Sea and not the Dead Sea, which is where I was a few days ago, is that firstly, there's no waves in the Dead Sea. It's completely still, like a pane of glass or a billiard table. So no waves and no boats. You probably will over the course of the next 20 minutes, half an hour, hear some boats in the background. And there are no boats at all in the Dead Sea. I presume because it would just, there's so much salt and magnesium in the water that it would just rot the boats. In fact, there's nothing living in the Dead Sea, which is why it's called the Dead Sea. The salinity content is, I think, somewhere in the mid-30s%, and normalcy is around 7%. And so, whilst that's really not very good for fish, it's excellent if you want to go and kind of get a little bit more healthy. So that was one of the reasons we went to the Dead Sea, to go and float in the Dead Sea. And it's very nice. You can you feel very relaxed because there's loads of magnesium. And you can also slather yourself in Dead Sea mud, and you put this mud all over you and you kind of allow it to bake dry. And it's the end of November as I record this, and it's still pretty hot. It was got dry quite quickly. And then you go and soak in the sea and it all comes off and you feel good and your skin's all smooth and all the rest of it. So very energising on the face of it. I have to say there was something slightly odd about my Dead Sea experience, and that is that, and I've found this before once or twice, and that is I absolutely stank of kind of sulphur afterwards. I think the sulphur content is very high in the Dead Sea, as is the magnesium and a lot of the other minerals in the sea. Try as I might, when I tried to wash it off in the shower afterwards, I stank of sulphur. So I don't know if that's anyone else's experience, but I did feel very relaxed. And would it be top of my list for things to do to go and get more energy? I'm not sure, but I think there were clearly people staying where we were in the Dead Sea who'd come really to partake in the waters and breathe the fresh air of the Dead Sea. And it was nice. It's a slightly surreal destination. It's the lowest point on earth. But as for Jordan in general, I would highly recommend it, because then from the desert we flew into Amman and then went to the Dead Sea, and that's the kind of healthy bit. Then we went to see Petra, one of the 7 new wonders of the world, and now we're here in the Red Sea. And again, it's almost December, it's perfectly warm here, it's in the mid-20s. I'm sitting here sweating away as I record this I'm looking like a bit of a Brit, to be honest, in a large sun hat and with my bottle of water next to me. But a lovely place to kind of feel healthy for a few days and re-energized by not doing very much. The Dead Sea was the kind of healthy bit, I suppose. So that's where I am today, and as always, Zestology is my journey towards more energy and vitality, and just kind of taking you along for the ride. And this year I've read some excellent books, and I thought rather than do a review of the year, I'd do a review of my favourite books of the year and see if that resonates for you, because I know one of the most popular parts of the podcast is the bit where I ask a guest to recommend a book that they've read or enjoyed, and it can be fiction or non-fiction. And so I've picked 3 non-fiction books that I've read over the last 12 months, and 1 or maybe 2 fiction books, only because I can't remember the name of the second fiction book. So that is what's called proper planning. The first non-fiction book that I'm going to recommend is Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker. You might have heard me talk about this on the podcast already. Sleep is a topic that comes up again and again on Zestology, quite simply because the link between sleep and energy is so intricately linked. As you know, I track all sorts of things on a day-to-day basis. I track my energy levels and how good I feel and all the rest of it. And if I plot a graph of correlation between how energized I feel on a particular day and how much I've slept, it's almost exactly the same. The graphs follow each other exactly over the peaks and the troughs, and invariably on the days that I've slept for 4 hours, my energy level is down. And you might say, well, obviously, but isn't that the point? Because if we do focus on how we can sleep a little bit more and improve our sleep, then we will increase our energy. And that is the topic of this podcast. So Matthew Walker is interesting because he is a professor of sleep at Stanford University, and he's dedicated the last 20 years of his life to studying why we sleep. And he's got a sleep laboratory. And as a plane takes off in the background from Aqaba Airport, I don't know if you can hear that or not, but he's been wiring people up with sophisticated neurotransmitters that measure how people sleep, how deeply they sleep, and how they sleep under certain different conditions. This first book, I would say, is more of a kind of knowledge changer rather than a game changer. It was absolutely fascinating to know. I mean, I'd say there's like 4 main sections to the book, and the first 3 are really, here's what happens when we sleep well and when we don't sleep well, and here's all the things that are going to go wrong if you don't sleep well. And then the last chapter is like, right, how can we actually change this and make it better? And the reason that I'm recommending it is because actually I made one principal change from reading this book that I hadn't done before, and that is I realised that I needed a set sleep time. And my sleep times have always been all over the place, partly because I work in TV and often I finish at midnight and I don't get back until after 1 a.m, and I'm in no mood to sleep when I've been working hard only an hour beforehand. But when I started to regulate my sleep time, so going to bed at 11 o'clock every night, inspired by Matthew Walker's book, I started to sleep better. And how do I know that I'm sleeping better? Firstly, I just know. And secondly, I wear an Oura ring, and that's told me. Oh, and by the way, if you want an Oura ring, you can Google it, I suppose, O-U-R-A, Oura. And if you use the code Zestology, you can get 50 quid off. 50 quid or $50, one of the two, but quite a substantial amount. So I know from the Oura ring that I'm sleeping better now that I've got a consistent sleep time. And obviously that's not possible every night, because if I am working until midnight, I can't go to sleep at 11 p.m. But the rest of the time it's 11 p.m. and that's going pretty well. The experiments that he does are frankly astonishing, and all the evidence pointing towards a consistent sleep time, a consistent amount of sleep being so good for our health. He also outlines in quite kind of scary detail the link between bad sleep and chronic disease, and he goes through quite a few of them, mental and physical. And I defy you to read that book and not feel a little bit worried by all those nights of partying in your 20s and what it's done to your general health when you stayed awake until 6 o'clock in the morning and then got up at 7 for work. Or was that just me? The last reason that I want to recommend this book, Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker, is because it's a great way of falling asleep at night. There are some books that I will read, especially I love fiction, and there's a couple of fiction recommendations coming up. There's some books that I will read that I find it hard to turn out the light at 11 p.m. Simply because it's so exciting, and that's often fiction. With Why We Sleep, there is something very soporific about reading that book and then just wanting to go to sleep. And in fact, I've got a friend, Lucy, who's been reading it at around the same time as me, and she said, I just find it impossible to finish this book because I keep reading 3 pages and then falling asleep. So it works on a very immediate level, this book as well. That's my first book recommendation. I hope you enjoy that one. Right, the second one, which I read around the same time, is Marie Kondo's The Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up. Very interesting, famous book. It's taken the world by storm, has sold millions of copies. I first heard about her through Tim Ferriss, I think. And the idea is that you rapidly tidy up your place, and that tidies up your mind as well. And once you free up your physical space, then you free up plenty of mental space for all the things that you were destined to do. what I loved about this book is that I've always known that I'm someone who likes kind of order and cleanliness and tidiness in my own space, but I'm not by nature a very tidy person, which is a real issue, because basically I like things to be tidy, but I'm not good at tidying up. And Marie Kondo has got an excellent method for tidying up. Now, I can tell you it very briefly now, but don't think that you can just start doing it, having heard me talking about it. I think it'd be better if you actually read the book as well. It's a very short book, it won't take you long to read, and you can start to tidy as you go. The essential method is, don't do it by room. That's the wrong way to do it. Do it by category. So let's say the different categories might be clothes, books, personal mementos, kitchen utensils, whatever it might be. And with each individual category, you get everything out at once and put it all out in the middle of a room. So for clothes, for example, you put all your clothes in the middle of a room, and I did this midway through the book. My girlfriend thought I was completely mad. And then you pick up each item of clothing and you ask yourself a simple question, which is only 4 words long. So you pick up each item of clothing and you hold it and you look at it and you ask yourself, does this spark joy? Okay, so you pick up a t-shirt and you say, does this spark joy? And if the answer is yes, you keep it. If the answer is no, you discard it. If the answer is not sure, you can maybe kind of put it into a not sure pile and then come back to it a little bit later on. I can't remember if that's Marie Kondo's advice or just what I did, but that's how I did it anyway. I mean, I must say it's quite shocking for someone who prides himself on being fairly minimalist and not being too kind of materialistic. It's shocking how much gubbins there is that you collect over I've been in my place 12 years, so 12 years of just accumulating stuff. It really is shocking. In a 1-bed flat, you wouldn't think there's that much to collect, but there is. And so a lot got thrown out, a lot of clothes. And what was nice afterwards is the feeling of order that it created, for instance, in my wardrobe. Now, when I get undressed at night, rather than just kind of shoving everything to one side, I actually put it away because I know there's plenty of space to put it away. There's a nice orderly space to put my shoes, because 90% of my shoes had fallen to bits, but for some reason I was keeping them, for example. That's the basic theory behind Marie Kondo's The Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up. I have to say I haven't done everything in the book. There are 1 or 2 methods for tidying that I haven't done. For instance, she believes that everything has an energy. So a pair of pants has an energy. And for any Americans listening, pants for us is underwear, not trousers. But a pair of pants has energy. A pair of socks has energy. Therefore, don't squish them at the bottom of the drawer. How can they bring you joy or feel joy themselves? As you can see, I mean, this podcast is about energy, but it is kind of stretching a point a bit to think that a pair of pants has energy. But that's what Marie Kondo believes. And so she believes that you shouldn't fold your things in piles from the bottom upwards, but you should fold them in horizontal rows. A little bit like, if you go into a shop and there's kind of a load of t-shirts, but they're all kind of folded pointing upwards, so you can pull one out at random, like in a drawer. That's how you should fold your stuff, according to Marie Kondo. Have I followed that bit? No, but I've done everything else. And I think there's, I'm very interested in exploring the idea of energy at an immediate level. This podcast is about energy. It came about because I got a virus in the jungle and I had 3 months off work and I didn't have any energy. But also at a much deeper level, what are these unseen forces of energy between us that we can't see but we know exist? Why is it that being in the presence of some people and even some things makes you feel a certain energy and others makes you feel a very different energy? So that's the second book, The Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up by Marie Kondo. The third one is Unshakable by Tony Robbins, Your Financial Freedom Playbook, Creating Peace of Mind in a World of Volatility. And I realise that this might be slightly off topic for some people, but I'm not sure that it is actually. Firstly, I know that Tony Robbins isn't to everybody's tastes and everybody's likings, but I personally think he's got a lot to offer, as long as he takes some of it with a pinch of salt. I always feel, I've been to 2 of his seminars, one the whole thing and one just for one day, and I felt slightly British and reserved when I was asked to kind of get up and sing and dance and whoop and holler and let go. I felt very British about doing that, but actually I enjoyed it when I did it. And the clue, I think, and the reason that I'm recommending it is in the title, creating peace of mind in a world of volatility. Looking after your money is definitely an act of self-care, and it's not really something we learn how to do. And despite the fact I've probably got quite a left brain mind, I like a bit of creativity as well, so probably equally left brain and right brain, and I've always been involved in my professional career in quite kind of creative pursuits, and therefore I don't know very much about money and how to look after it and how to invest and where to invest and how much to invest in stocks or how much to invest in funds or what they even are. I just don't know that stuff. And what I liked about this book, and I read this on this holiday, so there is a bit of recency involved here, but it's really helped me to solidify my own personal approach to money and what I want to do with it. I have learned from Tony Robbins a way that I can invest my money to help it grow, but also feel kind of fairly safe that if things go wrong, if it all goes a bit tits up, basically, I'll be all right. Which is quite a nice way to feel, and I'm sure that you would probably like to feel like that about your money as well. So part of it is kind of financial freedom through having the right approach to money, the right mental game when you come to thinking about money, but most of it is pretty nitty gritty. It's the difference between funds and stocks. If that's not going to be something that floats your boat, I would actually recommend reading this book even more, because if you don't, you just won't know about it. But in terms of saving early, and I know it just sounds a little bit boring, doesn't it? Providing for yourself and being comfortable with money in the future, but it's important stuff. And for me, it was stuff that I didn't know already. I thought it was going to be really basic. It was anything but. It was advanced stuff that I just had no idea about. Didn't know the difference between mutual funds, index funds, stocks, shares, where to invest, how much to invest in one thing, how to make sure that you don't worry even when there's a downturn and all the rest of it. So I realised that a book about money might not necessarily float your boat, but I think this is a really interesting one. And if you do read it, you must let me know, or any of these books, you must let me know. You can head to tonywrighton.com and let me know what you think. Because I think with that one, I think you'll read it and you'll make a few changes. Especially if you're like me and you spent the vast majority of your career titting around in TV and radio and having no clue about how the financial world actually works. And I like the way that he talks about how you can invest ethically and so on. I think that's important too. And look after those nearest and dearest to you as well. So that's my third book recommendation. I've got a couple of others. There's one more non-fiction one which I want to recommend, and that is, it's not that on topic for a podcast about energy, but it is a brilliant short book, and it is called A Short History of Progress by Ronald Wright, and it's about all the famous civilizations of our time in history and how they all followed pretty much the same principles, the same birth, the same growth, the same decline, and the same death. It's a very powerful book. It's very worrying because you will realise how the civilizations of, for instance, the Roman Empire or Easter Island, the community that lived on there, how they followed a very similar trajectory to the Western civilization that we live in now. And how you might be able to deduce from the book that we're in a decline. But I think it's worth reading, and I think it provokes a lot of thought. And I read that about 6 months ago, A Short History of Progress by Ronald Wright. That's good as well. That's good. Right, a couple of non-fiction books. I'm not entirely sure if I've got the name right of this book, but I'm here. It's a beach in Jordan. I don't have Wi-Fi. I'm just going to have to tell you and hope that it's right. It's called Light in the Darkness. Light in the Darkness. And it is a book set in the Second World War, and it's about a blind girl and a German boy and their separate stories and how their paths eventually collide. Amazing book. This is obviously the first fiction book that I'm recommending, Light in the Darkness. I think it won a Pulitzer Fiction Prize, possibly last year, and I heard about it from loads of different people and love reading fiction. I find it pretty much the best way to relax, and it's just a beautiful book, very evocative, as you'd imagine, quite sad at points as well, but also uplifting at other points. Light in the Darkness, and if that's not totally the right name for the title, then I will come back at the end of this podcast when I edit this in London and I'll tell you what the actual name of it is. But it's something like that. If you Google that, you find it. Okay, I just paused this podcast to go and Google it, and I had the name completely wrong for this book. It's called All the Light We Cannot See by Anthony Doerr, spelt Doerr. All the Light We Cannot See. I got it. Well, there was one word right, wasn't there? Brilliant book, and it won the 2014 Pulitzer Prize for Fiction. So I hope you enjoyed that one, and I'm kind of glad that I did go and actually just find that one out. The second book that I'm going to recommend is another book that I finished on the first couple of days here in Jordan in the Dead Sea, actually, and that is called Love is Blind by William Boyd. I love William Boyd. I've read every single book that he's read. And if you like fiction and you like historical fiction, I think you'll like this one. It is about a 19th century piano tuner. I'm losing you, aren't I? Don't let that put you off. It's a brilliant book. I don't want to give too much away, actually, but it's about a 19th century piano tuner who travels the world. And I'll leave it at that. Two good fiction books for you. I've read loads, but that's a good one. And that is pretty much it for this podcast. I hope you've enjoyed it. I thought, the last couple of years I've done a review of the year, bringing together some of the highlights of the podcast from the people I've interviewed, and I do love doing this podcast. It is, a labour of love is maybe stretching a point a little bit, but it's certainly a passion project for me. It's a great pleasure to do it, and it kind of gives me excuse sometimes to think, if I go to Jordan, I could go to the Dead Sea, and that would be interesting to talk about a little bit on the podcast as well. So yeah, it's just something that I really enjoy, and kind of seems to coexist quite well with the work I do at Sky and everything else. So I thought I'd do something different this year and talk about the books that I've enjoyed rather than sum up the podcast. But obviously you can find all the old podcasts on iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or anywhere else that you listen to podcasts. And I guess this is the last podcast of the year as well. So happy Christmas, happy New Year, have a great festive season, whatever you are doing. I'll be back on the first day of January with a special 2019 podcast recorded with my good friend Dr. Stephen Simpson, where we come up with the things in 2019 that are going to give you more energy than ever before. And we've recorded this already, and I'm really excited about it. It's specifically tailored for your first day of 2019, so I hope you enjoyed that. It's got some real treats for you coming in the first couple of weeks of 2019 as well, but that one will be out on the first day, on January the 1st, 2019. Until then, have a good one. Thank you for listening to Zestology this year, and I'm getting rather hot and sweaty here, so I'm going to go and sit in the shade. Thanks for listening to Zestology, and I'll see you in 2019.